My name is Mark Hale, and I used to believe that if you gave long enough, quietly enough, and consistently enough, you would eventually be loved. Or at least respected. But I was wrong. Respect has a shelf life. And mine had expired without warning. That Thursday afternoon, I came home early, 2 hours ahead of schedule, which was rare for me. My office had held a small ceremony, nothing fancy. Just a cake, a handshake, and a folder with the final retirement documents inside. $3.5 million. That was the number in black and white. A number that felt like the final weight of my entire life. 37 years of loyal service. Rising before dawn. Holding back my opinions. Building something that would last. And for what? I parked the car slower than usual. I remember that detail, the deliberate stillness in my hands. I didn't want to walk in with the announcement still echoing in my head. I didn't want confetti or champagne. I wanted the kitchen light to be on, the kettle steaming, Laura sitting at the table in her blue robe, the one I bought her for her 50th. I wanted Emma to be upstairs, maybe reading, maybe scrolling through her phone. I wanted the house to be full of the life I'd paid for and kept running year after year. But it didn't go that way. I stepped inside, quietly. Habit, really. I'd never been the kind of man who announced himself. And then I heard it. Laura's voice, sharp and clear from the kitchen. He thinks it's his money. A laugh. Not mine. Emma. That clipped, smug sound she always made when she thought she was clever. Let him sign the papers and get out of here. That's what she said. Word for word. I didn't move. The hallway smelled like lemon polish. Still fresh from the cleaning lady who came on Wednesdays. There were framed pictures lining the walls. Emma as a toddler in Disneyland, her arms wrapped around Mickey Mouse. Laura and me on the Oregon coast 20 years ago, before my back started aching in the mornings. The wedding photo, of course. That one always made me stop. Laura in white, me in a rented tux. Emma holding the bouquet like she was already part of it all. She was 7 then. Her father wasn't there. He hadn't been in years. I stared at that photo as their voices continued behind the kitchen door. Soft now, but no less dangerous. Once it clears, it's done, Laura said. He won't even know until it's too late. They were talking about the pension. My pension. Not ours. Mine. The one I'd built quietly while covering every shortfall this family ever had. The same fund that paid for the new roof, the broken water heater, the cruise we took for Laura's birthday when she cried on the deck and said she'd never felt so taken care of. They were dividing it before I even had a chance to sit down. It wasn't anger that filled me in that moment. It wasn't heartbreak either. It was something older, heavier. The same feeling I used to get in high school when I'd walk into the locker room and hear my name spoken behind closed mouths. Shame. That's the truth of it. I felt ashamed. Because I knew, deep down, that this betrayal wasn't new. It had just finally spoken out loud. I backed out of the hallway without a sound. My keys were still in my pocket. The folder with the pension confirmation was under my arm. I left the house like a ghost walking through his own funeral. I drove with no destination. The sun was still high in the sky, casting that sickly pale glow Oregon gets in early spring. The clouds hung heavy above the streets, like they knew something too. Eventually, I ended up in the parking lot of a half-dead strip mall. One of those places with a nail salon, a payday loan office, and a diner that always smelled like old coffee and fryer oil. I parked the car, engine still running, and sat in silence. The radio was off. My phone was off. My hands didn't move. And in that stillness, the truth settled over me like ash. They had never planned to tell me. There would have been no warning, no discussion, just a signature, a soft goodbye, a lawyer's letter. Half my pension transferred, the rest divided under the label of equitable dissolution. That's what they would have called it, equitable, as if anything about the last 20 years had ever been balanced. It was never a marriage. It was a contract, and my role was simple: pay, provide, stay out of the way. I tried to think back to when it began, this silent unraveling. Maybe it was never stitched together properly in the first place. When Laura and I met, she was already a single mother. Emma was 9. Her biological father had left without much ceremony. Just a phone call and a final withdrawal from their joint account. I stepped in like a man laying bricks on a crumbling wall. I bought the groceries, covered the rent, took Emma to her soccer games. She called me Mark for the first 2 years, then switched to Dad when she wanted something bigger, like her first iPhone. I bought it anyway. When the house needed new gutters, I climbed the ladder myself. When Emma totaled her car, I took out a second mortgage to cover the replacement. When Laura's sister was diagnosed with cancer, I paid for the flights. When Emma didn't get into her first-choice college, I told her it didn't matter. I would cover whatever school she chose. And I did. Every decision I made was built around them. Not us, them. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being part of the equation. I was the equation. I was the one thing that kept the whole structure from collapsing. And because I held it up so well, they stopped seeing it. They stopped seeing me. What Emma said, "Let him sign the papers and get out of here." That wasn't a slip. It was a strategy. They'd had the conversation before. More than once. Laura's silence wasn't shock. It was agreement. And that's what broke me. Not the betrayal itself, but how easily they shared it. How little hesitation. How quickly I'd been reduced to a signature, a payout, and a plan. I sat there in that car, in that forgotten parking lot, for almost 2 hours. People came and went. Parents with toddlers, a man dragging a grocery cart of old blankets, a teenager smoking behind the Goodwill donation box. Life moved around me. I didn't move with it. I thought about driving to the coast, renting a motel, disappearing for a few days. But even that felt too generous. Why should I vanish to make room for their comfort? Why should I leave again while they stayed warm in the house I had paid for? And that's when the decision came. Not loud, not dramatic, just clean. There would be no confrontation, no scene, no shouting across the dinner table. That's what they'd expect. That's what they'd be ready for. But I had learned something more valuable than forgiveness over the years. I had learned silence. Silence is power. So I sat with it, let it settle into my bones like winter frost. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself. They would not see it coming. They would not get $1 more without consequence. They had planned this betrayal with confidence, because they believed I would never fight back. Because I had spent 20 years teaching them that I would always be the one who swallowed hard and said, "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. It had never been fine. The silence that had once protected them was now mine. And I would use it not to hurt but to vanish. To remove myself from the role they had carved for me like a gravestone. I was no longer Mark Hale, stepfather, provider, foundation. I was a man with clarity. And clarity is the sharpest weapon a quiet man can carry. I didn't go home that night. The car stayed parked in front of an abandoned storefront. My reflection faint in the windshield. Shoulders hunched. The retirement packet still unopened in my lap. I watched the strip mall go dark, one store at a time. Subway first, then the pharmacy, then the laundromat where a kid locked the door behind him and jogged off into the night. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just processed. Not like grief. Grief is loud, violent, hot. This was the opposite. Cold. Clinical. There's a moment, after the betrayal, after the knife has landed, after the blood has cooled, where everything becomes incredibly still. Not numb, not painless, but still. That's where I lived for the next 12 hours. Not thinking about them, not imagining the confrontation. I wasn't picturing Laura crying or Emma pleading or either of them offering up a half-formed excuse. Because there was nothing to confront. What they'd said in that kitchen wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a business plan. And I had been the last to read the memo. I started the engine at 7:03 the next morning. Fog blanketed the street, soft and gray. The heat clicked on automatically. The car smelled like pine from an old air freshener. I checked my watch, pulled onto the road, and drove. Not home, but to a name I'd kept saved in my phone for 15 years and never once called. John Ryder, pension attorney, old friend of my late brother. The kind of man you only called when you were ready to stop being polite and start being exact. His office sat in a quiet part of town, tucked between a defunct title company and a shuttered yoga studio. The kind of place people overlooked. Just like me. He opened the door himself. Still had the same silver beard and Oxford shirt. Still smelled like cheap tobacco and sandalwood. His voice was the same too. Slow, gravelly, no wasted words. "You look like hell, Mark." I handed him the packet without responding. He leafed through it in silence, nodding once, then again. When he reached the payout summary, he whistled under his breath. "You finally pulled the pin." I didn't. They did. He looked up. "Laura and her daughter." He closed the file. "Tell me everything." I told him enough. Not the emotions. Not the words that had pierced through the drywall. Just the facts. The pension was finalized. The money hadn't moved yet. No joint accounts had been modified. No permissions updated. The signatures were still mine and mine alone. He didn't write anything down. He didn't need to. When I finished, he leaned back and folded his hands across his stomach. "You want to blow it all up?" "No," I said. "I want to move it. Smart. Quietly. Smarter. Today." He nodded once. "Then we move quick." That was the start of it. Nothing violent. No scorched earth. Just paper perfectly arranged. We opened a trust in my name, irrevocable, airtight. Set the beneficiary to a veterans housing nonprofit I donated to over the years. He asked me if I wanted to leave anything for Laura. I said no. Not even a gesture. Not even $1. He didn't flinch. Next, we revoked all financial permissions she had ever held. Removed her as a medical proxy. Froze access to the credit cards I had opened for her emergencies. Changed every password. Every PIN. Every access code tied to accounts I had spent 20 years building. John made a list on a yellow legal pad. It was long. By noon, the paperwork was filed. By 4, the digital authorizations were complete. I had set up new accounts, rerouted the payout, locked down the equity. The house was still in both names, but the mortgage was paid. The utilities were under my control. The internet, the water, the insurance, all mine. And no one at home had a clue. That night, I checked into a hotel 2 towns over. Small place. No frills. Clean sheets, cold tap, quiet halls. I paid cash. No paper trail. No explanation. Just me and a prepaid flip phone I picked up at a gas station on the way. I watched the news with the sound off. I ate vending machine peanuts. I stared at the ceiling for hours, eyes open, feeling the weight of clarity settle deeper into my bones. By the next morning, it had started. 32 missed calls. 9 voicemails. All from Laura. I didn't answer. Later that day, Emma texted. Not with words. Just a screenshot. It was a wedding invoice, $12,800 outstanding. Her venue had pulled the deposit. The attached message read, "Card declined. Please contact your payment provider immediately to avoid cancellation." No greeting. No explanation. Just a demand. As if I were still the one footing the dream. I deleted the message. By evening, the calls started coming from numbers I didn't recognize. Her sister. Her aunt. A man I didn't know who turned out to be her cousin's fiancé. All of them concerned. All of them shocked. What they were really was panicked. Because the scaffolding was gone. The man who said yes to everything, who moved quietly, who never demanded anything in return. He had disappeared without warning. The man they thought would sign his name and vanish was no longer part of the plan. Laura finally got through the next day. I didn't recognize the number. That's the only reason I picked up. Her voice was different. Not soft. Not angry. Just unsure. "Mark," she said. I didn't reply. "I don't know what's happening. Your cards aren't working. The checking account's empty." Emma's in a panic. "We thought there must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," I said. Silence. Mark, I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" "I didn't do anything, Laura. You did. You and your daughter. You made a plan. I'm just reacting to it." She stammered. It was just a conversation." "It wasn't. Don't lie," I said. "Not now." The pause on the line was long enough to feel like a verdict. I'm sorry, she whispered, but it didn't sound like sorrow. It sounded like strategy unraveling. I hung up. I didn't block her. That would have been a kindness. I let the calls come. Let her feel the weight of every unanswered ring. Emma's texts came in waves. First venom, then desperation. You don't get to do this. You're ruining everything. I need that deposit back or I'm screwed. Please just talk to me. Just this once. I didn't answer, because what they wanted wasn't a father, wasn't a partner, wasn't even a man. They wanted a faucet, and I had finally turned it off. That weekend, I drove to the coast, found a small Airbnb near the water, the kind with creaky floors and driftwood furniture and the scent of salt seeping through the windowsills. I spent 3 days listening to the waves, watching the seagulls dive into the breakers, making a fire with my own hands. I didn't check my phone, didn't open my email, didn't miss them. I thought about every Thanksgiving I had carved the turkey while Laura laughed at the other end of the table. Every Christmas morning I had sat cross-legged on the carpet watching Emma open her gifts like she'd earned them. Every late night I stayed up sorting bills, patching drywall, researching cheaper insurance, transferring balances to keep us afloat. Invisible labor, silent effort. That's what they never saw. That's what they never wanted to see. Because if they saw it, really saw it, they'd have to admit that I wasn't just a fixture in the house. I was the architect. And architects don't bleed when the tenants decide to move out. They just take the plans and walk away. When I returned to town, I rented a small studio apartment near the river. Sparse. Clean. Just enough. I didn't tell anyone. I let them stew. Let them chase ghosts. Let them realize that their safety net had been alive the whole time, and now it was gone. I wasn't hiding. I was watching, and they were unraveling, piece by piece. I didn't need to be there to see it fall apart. I just needed to stop holding it up. By the 4th day of silence, their world began to buckle. Not in one dramatic crash, but in layers. Quiet failures, blocked transactions, legal stalls, voicemails no longer returned. Emma's wedding planner called the house twice before giving up. Her dress appointment was canceled. Her florist sent a refund form, minus the non-refundable deposit, of course. I knew the numbers. I knew how the dominoes were set up. And I knew exactly which one I'd flicked. Laura left 6 messages in a single day, each one less confident than the last. Mark, we really need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. Call me, please. Emma's wedding is falling apart. She's devastated. You don't have to punish her like this. I checked the bank again. The accounts are still locked. We need access. I need access. I know you're hurt, but we can fix this. This is cruel, Mark. You're being cruel. Please. Just please. I played them once. Then I deleted them. Not out of anger, but because they no longer meant anything. They had made me invisible for years. Now they were learning what true invisibility feels like. The lawyer reached out next. Not mine, hers. Some firm out of Portland. Clean letterhead. Neutral tone. We understand you've made changes to shared financial structures. Our client would appreciate the opportunity to discuss a fair and timely resolution. I didn't respond. John did. 1 sentence. All assets are secured and legally partitioned. Any further contact must be made through counsel. That was the first time they realized I wasn't improvising. They'd assumed I was reacting. Emotional, sloppy, desperate to retaliate. But this wasn't revenge. It was extraction. Precise. Cold. Absolute. 2 days later, Laura tried something new. She called from a blocked number and left a message without anger. Without tears. Just a quiet plea. Mark, I miss you. I don't care about the money. Care about us. Please come home. But the pause before us. The way her voice trembled on that word. Told me everything I needed to know. She was improvising. Reaching for anything that might work. Didn't. Because it wasn't about coming home. There was no home left. They had burned it when they turned my loyalty into a liability. Emma, of course, escalated. Her texts doubled in length, then in frequency. You've embarrassed me in front of everyone. My friends, my fiancé's family, they think I'm some kind of leech. Do you realize how this makes Mom look? Like she married you for your pension. If you don't fix this, I swear I'll tell everyone what you did. I'll make sure people know the truth. I almost laughed. The truth? They'd never been interested in the truth. Only the version that kept their hands clean and their accounts full. Let them tell their story. Let them cry victim. It wouldn't matter, because deep down, every person they lied to would hear the ring of something hollow. And eventually, someone would ask, if he really meant nothing to you, why did you build your lives on his back? They didn't have an answer for that. The next week brought silence again, but it was different this time. Tense, coiled, the stillness that comes before a storm, not after. Then it cracked. It was a Saturday. Gray, quiet, windless. I'd made coffee in the small kitchen of my studio. Just beans, boiled water, and a metal press. The simplicity of it felt clean, earned. My phone lit up just after noon. Laura, calling. Again. I let it ring. Then it buzzed with a message. Emma's wedding is off. I hope you're happy. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I felt triumph. I didn't. There was no joy in it. No satisfaction. Just confirmation. The machine had stopped turning. The momentum had died. The gears were grinding against air now, trying to spin a future that had never been theirs to claim. The wedding was only the beginning. Later that day, I got an alert. One of the credit cards I had canceled months earlier was flagged for attempted use. I smiled. They were still trying to play the old game, still believing the rules could bend if they pushed hard enough. But the game was over. Emma called the next day. Not a voicemail this time, a real call. I didn't answer, but she tried again, and again, until finally I picked up. I didn't say anything. She launched into it without a greeting. You've humiliated me. I stayed silent. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone. You've ruined this wedding, ruined everything. Still nothing. And then her voice cracked. The fury broke into something softer, something uglier. I can't pay for it, okay? I can't fix this. I don't have the money. You know that. You knew that. Yes, I did. That had always been the deal, hadn't it? They walk through the fire and I carry the burns. Not anymore. I spoke just one sentence. You made your plans. I made mine. She hung up, and that was the last time I heard from her. At least directly. Laura couldn't let go. She began sending long emails, paragraphs of nostalgia, of faux regret, of half-baked explanations that started with, I never meant to hurt you, and ended with, but you have to see our side. There was no side. There was only truth. And the truth was this. They never believed I would walk away, because I had built my identity around being dependable, predictable, generous to a fault. They mistook that for weakness. They confused kindness with permanence. But kindness has an expiration date, and mine had passed the moment they turned my love into a ledger line. I had spent years, decades, funding their safety, covering their failures, shielding them from consequence. And they had rewarded me with a plan that assumed I'd never find the courage to stop. They were wrong. The next cracks came fast. Emma's fiancé backed out. No fanfare, no drama, just a text message, according to Laura's cousin, who decided to call me after one too many glasses of wine and spill the whole thing. He didn't want to marry into chaos, she said. Said it felt like the foundation was rotten. It was. It always had been. They just painted over the mold and hoped no one would notice. Laura's job, too, began to slip. She'd gone part-time 3 years ago when I told her I'd cover more of the bills. Said she needed time for herself. For family balance. Now there was no balance. Just late fees and overdraft notices and a car with 2 bald tires and no one left to pay for them. I watched it all from a distance. Not gleeful. Not vindictive. Just quiet. Detached. I had become what they always treated me like. A ghost. But this time, the ghost had stopped paying the utilities. There were whispers now. In our old neighborhood. In the grocery store. At Laura's church. People who had seen the photos online, the anniversary posts, the family portraits, they were starting to ask questions. What happened? Why did Mark disappear? Why is the house for sale? The narrative was slipping from their control. And without money to buy silence, they couldn't fix it. One morning, I got a letter. A real one. Handwritten. From Laura. No return address. Just my name. My studio address. Inside, 5 pages. Apologies. Regrets. Please. She talked about the years we'd shared. The dinners. The vacations. The quiet Sundays on the porch. She said Emma was just scared. That she didn't mean it. That they both assumed I'd always be there because I always had been. That was the truth buried in her words. They never thought I'd leave because I had built a life around never leaving. But even loyalty has limits. Even dogs bite when they've been kicked too many times. I didn't reply. What was left to say? I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't taking revenge. I had simply stepped out of the script, walked off stage, closed the curtain on a show that had asked me to bleed for applause I never received. Let them rebuild without me. Let them explain their story however they wanted. I had no interest in playing the villain in someone else's fable, because I knew the truth. And the truth, unspoken as it was, had set me free. There's a silence that comes after a storm. Not peace. Peace is too soft a word. It's more like vacancy. The kind that lingers in a house after furniture's been moved out. You hear every creak, every echo. You feel how empty things really are, now that the illusion of fullness has collapsed. That's what I lived in. A silence not born from healing, but from absence. No more calls. No more texts. No more pleading voicemails or half-hearted threats. Even Laura had gone quiet. The last letter I received from her sat unopened on the corner of my desk for 6 weeks. Cream envelope. Neat cursive. Smelled faintly of the old vanilla perfume she used to wear when we still touched each other like we meant it. I never read it. I didn't need to. I already knew what was inside. More soft regrets dressed up as insight. Apologies shaped like barbed wire. Memories weaponized to distract me from the truth. But the truth didn't need their permission anymore. It was mine now, and it was heavy. Not in the way pain is heavy, but in the way understanding is. When the fog finally lifts and you see the wreckage clearly, the pieces of yourself you'll never get back, the years you'll never relive, the loyalty that went unspoken for so long it rotted into expectation. What surprised me most wasn't the betrayal. It was how expected it had become. Once the shock wore off, once the anger passed, all I could feel was shame. Not for them, for me. For how long I let it continue. For how many ways I taught them that I was a man who wouldn't leave. That no matter how they talked to me, no matter what they took, no matter what they planned behind my back, I'd keep paying, keep fixing, keep showing up with my hands full and my mouth shut. That's the thing no one warns you about when you become a stepfather. You think you're stepping into a family. You're not. You're stepping into a performance that started before you arrived, and you're always 2 scenes behind. No matter how hard you try, the script wasn't written for you. The applause isn't meant for you. You're the understudy in someone else's tragedy. And the audience? They never see you sweat. They just want the show to go on. I had spent years learning their rhythms, their birthdays, their allergies, their fears. Emma hated thunderstorms, used to sleep on the floor by our bed as a teenager, whispering nonsense into the carpet just to stay calm. I learned how to make her feel safe, how to make her laugh when she didn't want to, how to pay the rent without her ever knowing we were 1 medical bill away from the edge. But when it came time to split the money, my money, they didn't hesitate. Not even for a moment. He thinks it's his. Those words looped in my head for weeks. Not out of bitterness, but fascination. Not he knows it's his. Not he earned it. No, he thinks it's his. Like I had imagined the whole thing. Like my life, my labor, my sacrifice were just delusions wrapped in dollar signs. And maybe that's how they saw me all along. A useful fiction. It wasn't until the 3rd month after I disappeared from the house that I realized how invisible I had become. Not just to them, but to myself. Who was I without the role? Without the title of provider? without the constant churning pressure of keeping everything afloat? I didn't have an answer, so I built one. I started walking, first at night, in the empty parking lots behind my building. Then along the river trail, past joggers and cyclists and fathers pushing strollers, real fathers maybe, or maybe just men like me, clinging to the fantasy that showing up is enough. I went days without speaking to another human being. I learned the comfort of solitary meals, the dignity of locked doors, the quiet joy of sitting in a chair and knowing no one would ask anything of me. For the first time in decades, I lived without being a utility. No one called me dad, but no one called me a wallet either. And in that space something happened. Not forgiveness. That word never fit. You don't forgive a machine for breaking, you replace it. No, what happened was colder. Acceptance. I accepted that I had given more than they could return. I accepted that Laura loved the version of me who never said no. I accepted that Emma only respected sacrifice when it came with silence. I accepted that family, true family, is built on more than shared meals and paid tuition. It's built on reciprocity. And there was none. They had praised me when it was convenient, posed for pictures, posted Father's Day cards on social media with captions like, "Thank you for being there." But the second I became inconvenient, when the money was locked, when the trust was sealed, when the signature refused to come, they turned. I went from patriarch to pariah in less than a week. So what does that say? Was I ever a father? Was I ever a husband? Or was I just a budget line they never expected to lose? Some nights I still wonder, not because I want the answers, but because I want the question to haunt them. Do they sit at that kitchen table now? Laura and Emma, maybe Emma's friends or her new fiancé, whoever was shallow enough to ignore what she did. Do they ever look at the empty chair and ask, was it worth it? Was the inheritance worth the man? Was the plan worth the consequence? Was silence worth sacrifice? I'll never know. I don't speak to them now. Haven't in almost a year. The divorce was never filed. I imagine they're waiting, hoping, plotting a new angle. Maybe Laura thinks I'll soften, that I'll show up one day, holding the papers in one hand and an apology in the other. She doesn't know me anymore. Maybe she never did. I saw her once by accident. A grocery store on the edge of town. She looked tired, smaller, shopping with a friend. I watched her for 5 minutes from the frozen food aisle. She didn't see me, or if she did, she looked right through me, like they always did. I left without speaking, not because I was afraid, but because some things deserve to stay broken. Now I spend my days in the quiet. I volunteer sometimes, work on old radios, fix things no one else wants to fix. There's an odd satisfaction in taking apart a broken circuit board and breathing life into it again. Things are simpler when you know what each part is supposed to do. People aren't like that. People lie. They smile and call you family while drawing maps of your disappearance behind your back. But machines? They fail honestly. I trust them more. Some evenings, I sit on the bench by the river, notebook in hand, scribbling down memories. Not to remember, but to forget correctly. To rewrite the story so the man in it wasn't always waiting to be hurt. So he could at least walk away on his own terms. I don't pretend that I was perfect. I made mistakes. I overgave. I allowed the disrespect to fester, hoping it would change. I taught them that love means endurance, not boundaries. I let my silence become a contract they never signed, but benefited from every day. That was my fault. But now I've learned. Love without respect is servitude. Sacrifice without gratitude is slavery. And a man who forgets his own value will spend his life buying a seat at a table where no one ever planned to feed him. So here I sit, alone, but not empty. And I ask you, whoever's still listening to this voice, this confession, this flicker of a man who once believed effort was enough. Was I wrong? Was I wrong to step away when they'd already walked past me? Was I wrong to protect what little I had left after they carved so much out of me? Was I wrong to stop carrying people who wouldn't even remember the weight? Would you have stayed? Would you have signed the papers and smiled? Or would you, like me, make one silent move and never come back? Tell me now, because I already know my answer. I was never part of their family. I was only their foundation. And when I left, the house came down. Let it.